The air in the ballroom was thick with the weight of medals and whispered deference. From my seat, I watched my sister, Jessica, the golden child who never failed to shine, her perfectly made-up face frozen in a mask of pure disbelief. On the grand stage, a 4-star general stood at a podium, his voice echoing with authority. He spoke of a mission, a shadow war fought in silence, and said, "The success of Operation Nightshade hinged on one analyst's ability to decrypt foreign signals that had baffled our best minds for a decade." The general paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "Her call sign is Echo, and she is with us tonight." Jessica's gaze darted toward me, her younger, invisible sister, and for the first time in her life she looked truly lost. But that moment of reckoning was earned 3 weeks earlier, under the unforgiving glare of a Sunday morning sun. It was our parents' 40th anniversary brunch at the city's most exclusive country club, a place where wealth wasn't just displayed, it was the price of admission. I was the last to arrive, pulling my modest, decade-old Toyota Camry up to a valet who was busy parking a new Porsche. Jessica saw me and let out a theatrical groan. "Oh my God, Anna, are you serious?" Her voice, sharp and loud, cut through the polite chatter. "I thought I told you to rent a car. Did you borrow that from a daycare? It's mortifying." My father, a man who believed its curb appeal could measure a life's worth, just shook his head with that familiar practiced disappointment. "Honestly, Anna, appearances matter." The sting of it wasn't new. It was the same shame I felt when they celebrated Jessica's marketing promotion but called my academic publications a cute hobby. This time, however, it was different. A man in a tailored suit, waiting for his own car just a few feet away, had overheard the entire exchange. His eyes, cool and analytical, met mine for a fraction of a second. I knew him instantly. It was Deputy Director Marks of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He didn't know my face, but he read my reports every morning. His expression was a blank, unreadable wall, but I understood the silent assessment happening behind it. My own family had just, in a public forum, framed one of his agency's most critical assets as a bumbling, unserious failure. A cold fury, quiet and precise, began to solidify in my chest. It wasn't just about me. Jessica chuckled, basking in the attention. She thought she'd just scored another easy point in our lifelong rivalry. She had no idea she'd just belittled me in front of the man who signs off on my operational budget. To understand the ceremony that would eventually silence her forever, you have to understand the 2 lives I was living. To my family, my life was a grayscale photograph, flat, muted, and unremarkable. They imagined me in a drab cubicle somewhere in the labyrinth of federal bureaucracy, pushing papers, stamping forms, living a life of quiet, beige failure. It was a narrative they had written for me, a story so complete in their minds that no amount of truth could ever seem to revise it. They had no concept of the other world I lived in, the one that existed in the silent, humming darkness between ones and zeros. A world of vivid, high-stakes color, where my decisions had weight and my name meant something. I remember one Christmas dinner, the scent of pine and roast beef filling the air, the entire family gathered. My sister Jessica was holding court as usual. She had just landed a major account for her marketing firm, a high-end luxury watch brand. My father raised his glass, his face beaming with a pride he reserved only for her. "To Jessica," he announced, "to her killer instinct. She sees what she wants, and she gets it." The family applauded, a chorus of admiration for her tangible, glittering success. Later, when there was a lull in the conversation, I tried to share a piece of my own news. "I, had some good news at work, too," I started, my voice feeling small. A theoretical paper I wrote on advanced signals theory. It was just adopted as required reading at the National Cryptologic School. The table went quiet for a moment. My father cleared his throat, giving me a tight, polite smile. My mother, Carol, a woman who believed peace was always more important than fairness, patted my hand. "That's lovely, dear," she said, her tone the one you use for a child who has just shown you a macaroni necklace. Then she turned right back to my sister, her eyes bright with genuine interest. "Now, Jessica, you have to tell us more about the celebrity you met at the launch party." And just like that, my achievement was swept away. Another entry in the long internal ledger I kept. It sat there alongside the forgotten birthdays, the college graduation they were late for, the complete disinterest in any part of my life that couldn't be explained in a flashy sentence. My job was just my boring government admin position, a convenient label that absolved them of the need to ever truly see me. My real world had no launch parties. It had no windows. It existed in a place called a skiff, a sensitive, compartmented information facility, buried deep inside the concrete heart of Fort Meade. The only light was the cold, blue-white glow from a wall of monitors displaying torrents of complex data streams. The only sound was the low hum of cooling fans and the quiet, controlled breathing of the 3 other people in the room with me. 2 stone-faced colonels and a civilian director from the NSA. This was my office. Here, I wasn't boring Anna. Here, I was Echo. On one particular Tuesday, the quiet was shattered by a single, terrifying alert. I stood before the colonels, my voice steady as I pointed to a cascading line of code. We've detected a burst transmission using a quantum-resistant algorithm, originating from these coordinates, I explained, my mind racing faster than I was speaking. The timing is consistent with an ambush protocol. I'm recommending we immediately task the Rivet Joint Asset to triangulate the source before they can initiate their blackout protocol. There was no debate, no condescending dismissal. They listened. An order was given, a plane was rerouted, and 12 Special Forces operators who were walking into a trap were pulled back from the brink, all because of a pattern I saw in the noise. My direct superior, General Hayes, a man of few words and immense authority, approached me after. He looked at the screen, then at me, and gave a single sharp nod. "Good work, Echo," he said, his voice a low gravel. "You just saved lives." In that sterile, silent room, I was respected. I was essential. I held life and death in my hands. Then I would drive my 10-year-old Toyota back to my quiet apartment and get a call from my mother. She had called me the day after the country club incident, her voice dripping with placating sympathy. "You know how your father is," she'd whispered, as if he were a force of nature and not a man making choices. "He just wants to see you settled and successful. And Jessica's life is so visible. He can understand a corner office. Your work is so secretive it's hard for him to be proud of something he can't brag about at the golf course." I listened, the familiar weight of her excuses settling over me. She wasn't asking for my forgiveness. She was asking for my continued silence, for my complicity in my own erasure. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clear. For years, I had tried to speak their emotional language of promotions and parties. But they only respected one thing, status they could see. So I decided I would finally speak to them in the only language they understood, undeniable public authority. Clarity is a cold, quiet thing. It settled over me in my simple apartment, the one my family pitied me for. To them, these clean walls and sparse furnishings were proof of a life half-lived, a sign of my failure to launch. But on the screen of my encrypted laptop was a world they couldn't even imagine, a world where I didn't need to launch because I was already in orbit. An official email displayed an invitation, its header stark and official, the annual Joint Service Commendation Awards Gala. My unit was receiving a citation for Operation Nightshade, and as the lead analyst I had been designated to accept it. A slow, calculated calm washed over me. This wouldn't be revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. This was going to be a correction, a final, permanent adjustment to their flawed reality. I knew my family's weaknesses because I had studied them my entire life. My father, a retired regional sales manager, had always been obsessed with the illusion of prestige, forever craving access to the circles of real power he could never quite touch. My sister and mother orbited his ambition, their own values defined by his hunger for status. The official invitation allowed me to bring 3 guests. It was the perfect bait, and I knew they would take it without a moment's hesitation. Their own vanity would be the key that unlocked the trap. My plan wasn't emotional, it was operational, a series of precise, strategic steps. First, the guest list. I logged into the secure event portal, the same system I used for my daily work, and began to type. One by one, I formally submitted the names of my father, my mother, and my sister Jessica for the mandatory security clearance vetting. I thought about the irony of it, their lives being examined by federal agents, also they could attend a party they thought was for my boring job. Next, the vehicle protocol. I sent a formal request through internal channels to the event's logistics officer, politely declining the offer of a chauffeured government car. Citing operational consistency, I officially requested to use my personal registered vehicle, the decade-old Toyota, and be granted access to the priority diplomatic parking area. The very symbol of my supposed failure would become an instrument of the reveal. The final piece clicked into place during a brief, secure video call with the executive aide to General Hayes. "Ma'am?" I asked, my voice level. "Just confirming the general is still scheduled to present the unit citation for Nightshade?" The aide, a sharp woman who understood the politics of their world perfectly, allowed a small, knowing smile to touch her lips. "He insisted," she confirmed. "He also plans to have your call sign, Echo, writ into the official record. It's his way of saying thank you." The trap was now perfect. It would be sprung not by me, but by a 4-star general, making the truth absolute and undeniable. The embossed invitations were sent via federal courier. The RSVPs came back almost immediately, dripping with my family's excitement over a black tie gala. They had no idea they were entering my world by my invitation to witness my authority on my terms. The gala was held in a cavernous stone hall at the National War College, a place where history itself seemed to have soaked into the walls. The air was different here. It wasn't light with the scent of expensive perfume and champagne like my sister's parties. It was heavy with the quiet dignity of protocol and power. Their designer label did measure not a person's worth here, but by the ribbons and medals pinned to the chest of their dress uniform. Into this world walked my family, and they were immediately, painfully out of their depth. Jessica's sequined dress seemed garish under the hall's solemn lighting. My father, in his best suit, looked less like a captain of industry and more like a man trying to sell one a car. He tried to network, of course. I watched him approach a stern-faced admiral, his hand outstretched with a salesman's practiced confidence. The admiral gave him a curt, dismissive nod and turned away without a word, leaving my father standing alone, his smile faltering. It was the first crack in his armor. An usher led them to my table, a prominent spot near the front. They sat down, their confusion growing as several serious, decorated individuals approached, not to speak to my father, but to me. They greeted me with a quiet ma'am or a respectful Anna, their deference to a language my family had never heard spoken in my presence. Jessica just stared, a frown creasing her brow. She couldn't understand the currency of this room, and she couldn't understand why I seemed to have so much of it. Then, the lights dimmed. General Hayes walked to the stage, and a profound silence fell over the hall. He was a man who carried his authority not with volume, but with an unshakable stillness. He began to speak, his voice calm and steady, about a threat our country had faced in secret. He spoke of a digital war fought in the shadows, a conflict with consequences that would never, he said, make the evening news. He described Operation Nightshade, a sophisticated enemy plot to compromise critical American military assets overseas. My family listened politely, assuming this had nothing to do with me. This was the world of men like the general, not their quiet, unremarkable daughter and her boring admin job. As the general continued, my own internal ledger began to scroll. He spoke of an enemy that was hiding in the noise, and I remembered my father telling me my quiet hobbies were pointless. He spoke of needing an analyst who could see a pattern in the chaos, and I remembered Jessica mocking my love of puzzles and complex math. Then the general's tone shifted, becoming more focused, more personal. He spoke of a single analyst who worked for 18 months, an analyst who saw a pattern that thousands of others had missed, a pattern that ultimately led to the complete dismantling of the enemy's network. A flicker of confusion crossed my father's face. He was starting to connect the dots, but the conclusion was still impossible for him to accept. The linchpin of this entire operation, the general's voice suddenly boomed, filling every corner of the vast hall, was an analyst known only by her call sign, Echo. He paused, and his eyes found our table. He looked directly at me. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Tonight, for her service, and for the lives she saved, we are declassifying that name for this citation. My father's face began to drain of color. Jessica's jaw went slack, her carefully applied lipstick suddenly looking like a wound. "It is my distinct honor," the general declared, "to ask Anna Reed to the stage to accept the Joint Meritorious Unit Award on behalf of her team." Time seemed to slow down. The sound of 100 chairs scraping against the floor as the audience rose to their feet was a distant roar. I stood up, my movements feeling deliberate and calm. I saw only my family's faces. I saw 30 years of being overlooked, of being underestimated, of being patted on the head and dismissed. All of it collapsing in a single, silent, devastating moment. My walk to the stage felt like crossing a border into a new country, one where I was no longer an immigrant. As General Hayes pinned the medal to my dress, the weight of it was real, a solid, tangible proof of the world I truly inhabited. The applause eventually subsided. I returned to my seat, my family staring at me as if I were a ghost. But the reckoning wasn't over. As the dinner service was about to begin, the MC stepped to the microphone for a few routine logistical announcements. His voice was smooth and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, a reminder for our priority designers. Will the driver of the Toyota Camry, Department of Defense Special Access License Plate 7 to 8 Delta Echo X-ray, please have your vehicle staged at the East Diplomatic Gate for departure? There was a beat of silence. Then Jessica's head snapped towards me, her eyes wide with dawning horror. 7 to 8 Delta Echo X-ray. D-E-X. Echo. It wasn't a vanity plate. It was a federal identifier, a designation for personnel on critical duties, a signifier of a trust so deep it required a cloak of absolute anonymity. The car she had mocked, the junky Toyota she found so mortifying. It wasn't a symbol of my failure. It was the chariot of a ghost. And at that moment, she finally saw me. My father had spent my entire life teaching me the importance of status. In the end, it only took a license plate number for him to finally learn who in his family truly had it. When I returned to the table, the silence was a glass wall between us. My family sat stunned, isolated in a sea of formal uniforms and quiet confidence. They were no longer players in any drama. They were simply scenery, their flashy clothes and loud personalities rendered completely invisible in a world that operated on a different frequency. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Jessica just stared at the table's centerpiece, her face a pale blank mask. The world they had so carefully constructed, the one with them at the top and me at the bottom, had been publicly and irrefutably dismantled. Before the main course was even served, a United States senator approached our table. His hand extended not to my father, but to me. "Phenomenal work on Nightshade, Miss Reed," he said, his voice warm with genuine respect. "We're all in your debt." 2 other generals followed, each with their own words of quiet, sincere praise. They formed a small circle around me, their bodies physically shielding me from the family at my back. I was home. I didn't have to watch my family leave. Sometime during my deep conversation with a colonel about signals intelligence, they simply vanished. They slipped out of the gala without a word, leaving behind nothing but the cold weight of their absence, an absence I suddenly realized I no longer felt. A year can change everything. The silence from that night echoed, and in its wake, my own life grew. The corner office my father always worshipped as the ultimate symbol of success. I finally had one. The name on the door was mine, Anna Reed, Section Chief, Signals Intelligence Directorate. The quiet authority I had always possessed was now matched by the title. I led my own team now, briefing them in a state-of-the-art command center, a room of glass walls and glowing data screens that looked out over the sprawling green campus of Fort Meade. My voice no longer felt small here. It was the voice that set mission parameters, the one that gave direction, the one my team trusted to lead them through the digital shadows. That team became my real family. Our bond wasn't forged by blood or obligation, but by a shared silent mission and a deep intellectual respect for one another's capabilities. We communicated in a language of algorithms and analysis, our successes measured in averted disasters, not in flashy client acquisitions. There were no golden children here, only brilliant minds working in concert. My old Toyota Camry still sat in the parking lot, but now it was always parked in the reserved spot right next to the entrance. Sometimes I'd see one of the younger analysts, fresh out of training, look at my car. They wouldn't see a junker. They'd see the license plate, see the reserved spot, and they would smile, a small, knowing smile of understanding. The car was a symbol now, a quiet testament to the idea that the quietest professionals often do the most important work. I was leaving the facility late one evening last week. The sky a deep shade of twilight purple. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from my team lead about an overnight data run. But it was from a number I hadn't seen in a long time. It was from Jessica. The text was a wall of rambling, desperate words. "Anna, I am so sorry," it began. "I was horrible. We were horrible. I had no idea what you were doing, who you were. I see it now. I hope you can forgive me." I read the words over and over, standing there in the cool evening air. A year ago, this message would have been a tectonic event. It was the validation I had craved for decades, the apology I thought I needed to heal. I felt a brief phantom ache in my chest, the ghost of the little girl who just wanted her big sister to be proud of her. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a profound and unshakable sense of peace. My worth had never truly been in her hands to begin with. I slid my phone back into my pocket, the long message left unread, and I didn't reply. I got into my car, the familiar feel of the driver's seat a comfort. As I drove toward the main gate, the armed guards saw my car approaching. They straightened their shoulders and gave a sharp, respectful nod as I passed through. My sister believed a person's value was displayed on their driveway. I learned the true value is what gets you through the gate. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, share your story below. In this community, your expertise is always recognized.